I think I'm going to let you introduce this one. So
I
go
wasn't
for it,
ready.
Josh.
Let me do the horror one. I'm not ready. I'm not ready, Matt. I'm not ready to be handed this gift.
Okay, I will take on the burden of responsibility here. Five,
Yeah.
four, three, two. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Once More for Safety show. My name is Matthew. Joining me once again, as always, is Joshua.
Matt tried to hand over the introductions to me, and I absolutely refused to do it. I'm not doing it.
They know because I left it in the final edit.
Oh fuck! Sweet. I didn't realize that was going. Cut nothing out.
Of course, I'm leaving that in. Why would I not leave that in?
Cool.
We are back again this week. If you haven't had a chance, this is the first time you're listening to our show, we have a bunch of them that have already posted. We have interviews, we have discussion topics on all kinds of stuff, all related to micro-budget cinema. You can check it out on the Outpost Unknown YouTube channel. You can send us an email at outpostunknown@gmail.com if there's a specific topic, question, comment, concern, complaint that you have of anything that we're discussing. But we focus here mainly on micro-budget films, and we're talking films like less than $1,000 that you gather your friends together and go out and make a movie. And each week is a different topic. Now, Josh, what are we talking about this week?
Today or tonight or whenever time you're fucking listening to this, we're talking about scheduling this week, which I think is a great time to talk about since we're going through our own scheduling issues at the moment. It's a good time to talk about it.
You are currently knee-deep, or maybe even further than knee-deep in scheduling. So I definitely want to touch base on what you're doing with regards to scheduling. And I guess I would say that scheduling is the great underappreciated aspect of filmmaking, just in general. Even if you go up to the Hollywood side of things, I mean, you hear stories all the time, actors attached to things they have to drop out because of quote-unquote scheduling conflicts.
Right.
Those are real things, ladies and gentlemen. Scheduling conflicts are...
You have to, in our world, you have to bend a lot for the scheduling of your film, which is what, we're doing currently. So,
Yeah, because everybody that works on a micro-budget film, generally being part of cast crew, that's not their main role in life. That's not their job, right? So we're scheduling a bunch of individuals who have real lives that are saying, hey, I can give you a few hours here and there, but I got to work. I got to do this on this day and this day, and trying to find a time, because, we are employed ourselves. I mean, we have real day jobs.
Yeah.
So not only are we trying to start a giant movie, but trying to balance. Sometimes you have, I know for Chills Down Your Spine, I think I had 50 something total cast and crew that I had to schedule things around, multiple locations all over the place. You kind of at least are a little bit like you have one location. We can talk about how crazy it gets, but let's go all the way back. Let's go all the way back to your very first film. And as you're sort of preparing, I think I can speak for you. Did you have any real clue as to what you were getting yourself into? I would say no, right? Because I didn't.
I mean, so many films later, I don't know what I'm getting myself into. So, I mean, that first one, it's a nightmare.
So
it's a nightmare.
How much pre-production, like when you're getting ready to make your movie, right? You're casting your friends, you're getting all this stuff together. How much time did you think about scheduling before you realized, oh shit, I gotta make a schedule?
So the first movie that we made, we didn't even I'm gonna be real, we had no idea what we were doing, so we didn't even make a schedule. We were we shot our first film in order. So the people that we had, we were lucky. It was they had Monday through Friday jobs, and so free on the weekends and all that stuff. So we didn't really struggle that first film with a quote unquote schedule, because we had everybody just all right, this is the day, these are the days that we're shooting during the week, and we're shooting late at night, and we're shooting these pages. There was no schedule. It was just, this is what we're doing this week.
Did you ever block out time for scenes and things of that nature? Like okay, I'm shooting scene 10 between the hours of 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. Did you ever do anything like that on any of your
Uh,
films?
on well, yeah, so Remission was the first film that I learned that we had to put an actual schedule together, and that was just because so many films into it. We it was an organization thing more than anything. We were highly unorganized when we first started making movies. So scheduling was the first time I really ran into scheduling was Remission, and it was rough.
So let me ask you about before remission. So you said that you needed it for an organizational issue. What kind of problems did you run into on previous films when you tried to shoot with no schedule whatsoever?
we Nobody knows what the fuck you're doing if you don't put a schedule together. You know what I mean? Like, if you're sitting there saying, okay, on this date we need these two people for this amount of time and we're doing these pages, like, that's kind of a schedule, but it's not like we're not putting a schedule out weeks ahead of time. We are telling people, you know the Friday before the Saturday, this is what we're doing and this is who we need. It's terrible if you don't do that. It's Nobody knows what the hell you're doing, and on top of the other issues that you are already having, not knowing what the hell you're doing, just not having a schedule is just you're unorganized. You're left kind of trying to figure out what you're doing on the fly, and it's just a terrible situation.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I've always gone into my films with a schedule, but the joke is always like the schedule gets torn up on day one, because you fall
Right.
behind schedule, and then, but having a schedule is really beneficial, at least for me in the past, because like you said, it helps me keep track of what I'm supposed to be doing, right? If I have scenes 1 through 10 scheduled and they're, maybe a couple of them are out of order, or I have to do, shoot in one place at a certain time and another at another time, it allows me to remember, oh yeah, I got to go back and shoot scene 8 with this person here, or do this with this person, because if I don't, you're right. The very first film I ever made was a movie called A Ripper Runs Through It, and I'll probably put it up on the Outpost Unknown YouTube channel, so you'll be able to, listeners out there can go check it out. It's horrible. Shot it on VHS. It's absolutely terrible, but I love it because it's the first film I made. But I had this whole sort of thing, like it was like, hey, I had a cast of like 30, 40 people that were supposed to show up on a Friday after high school classes got over, and only 5 people showed up, and that whole schedule was gone. It was just, yeah, I was like, well, there's no point to follow the schedule anymore, and it became a nightmare trying to just randomly shoot things and trying to remember, oh god, I have to film something else to connect to this because this has to all be changed. Scheduling is very, very difficult.
No,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, so you were smart and you started with a short film for your first film. Was that easier to schedule than, say, when you went into your feature film stuff?
I would say definitely, definitely. The only reason why feature film stuff is more complicated than a short film is generally short films you shoot them over 1 or 2 days, so it's a lot easier to say, hey, we're going to do this on this weekend, and from these times. So can you be available? And then people would show up with a feature film. Especially when we started getting a little bit more extravagant, like Shivers and Chills and all that, and other movies that shall not be named, it became it's an art form to try to get all these people together in a certain spot, especially when you're traveling to different locations. You have people from out of town. You got to schedule time for, you got to let them know, hey, you got to leave, you basically got to leave your house at this time to get to this location in
Mm-hmm.
Aurora, Nebraska by this time. We can't shoot unless you're on set and you're ready to go, because if they don't show up, then you're thrown off because you're like, well, now we got to sit around and wait for them. Trying to negotiate people's real lives. So let's say you have a scene, you can only shoot it on a weekend, on a Saturday, for example, and it's got 3 actors, but one of the actors that's required for it is working every weekend for the next 2 months, and they can't get out of it. Well, what do you do? How do you schedule that scene? Do you have to change the script to take that person out of it? Do you try to, fine, I'm going to shoot it overnight on a Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the morning when people can get together? You know, it can be it can be a nightmare. I will say that.
Here's a question: have you ever had to say the day before you're going to shoot something, an actor reaches out? Say, let's go with the day of, the morning of you shooting a big scene. An actor reaches out and says, "Hey, I had this come up. I'm not going to be able to make it today." And then, have you ever had to just redo or your whole schedule for that day, just on the fly?
Yes. So that's happened to me twice. One on the film that shall not be named, and in that
I'm
instance,
going to say it.
in that instance, what happened was, well, that's fine. You can go ahead and say it. Say it.
Uh, Isabel,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, cool.
So the scene in question was the sequence when they're all at the bar, and we had an actress that lived in Lincoln. We shot that in Lincoln. We shot it at Dish because Tyler was the one that secured us that location, and we were filming
Right.
in there. And she's a main part of that whole scene. And she got hung over from the night before partying and didn't show up. And I called her, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm hungover. I'm not going to be able to make it." And we have everybody there. I mean, there's probably at least 6 or 7 other actors there because it's a fairly big scene.
Hmm.
And it wasn't one of those things where I could easily say, "Hey, Tyler, can you just secure Dish again for us another week?" So I just had to roll with it. And so I wrote her out of the script on the fly. I said, she's out, and had to reconfigure some dialogue, gave lines to other actors to say, and basically from that point forward, she wasn't in the film anymore. I don't even know if we see her death in the film. I think she just kind of disappears. I don't even remember. But so that was an instance when you can schedule everybody there, but you schedule and someone doesn't show up because they do their own thing the night before, and
Right.
and so that's a problem. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that has happened to me before. How about you? Has that
I
happened
had
to you?
it. Yeah, I had it happen during Pig Face. I had really like a long Saturday scheduled, like starting at 8 in the morning and going till whenever it got dark during the summertime in Nebraska. So a good chunk of a day. But I had a girl reach out the night before and tell me that she wasn't gonna be able to be there because she had something or other come up. So everybody that had those scenes and that dialogue memorized, I reached out to that night and was like, "Hey, no longer doing these scenes. Now we're doing these scenes." And everybody showed up the next day and they're like, "You're an asshole. We had to sit up all night long and memorize different dialogue." And I mean, just like tore me a new asshole. But I mean, I could have canceled that day, but uh, we didn't have the time to not shoot a day. We were on limited time, so I just told everybody, switch gears. We're doing a different scene. So, and
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure Heather had to. She had planned a death that day, and she had to work on the fly also because she wasn't ready for the deaths we did that day.
yeah, and that's the thing. It's like sometimes when people watch these micro budget films and they're like, "Oh, you can clearly," like I've had a sequence, for example, where I have someone has canceled last minute and I still shoot the scene, but I'm like, "Well, I can get pickup shots with them later on." And I can do some editing sorcery and make it look like they were there, in the scene with everybody else. It never works out as good as you think it will in your mind,
Right.
but I have done that before as well. And again, you're under so much pressure and stress in the moment. It's already stressful, and then when
Right.
someone cancels on you last minute, it becomes even worse because you're like, "Oh my god, what am I going to do?" You're trying to pick up the pieces and do all this stuff on the fly. And but yeah, getting sort of back to the scheduling component of it, has there ever been a time when you, like, how good of a scheduler would you say you are? You've done multiple films now, for over multiple years. Do you feel like you have this kind of down to a science, or are you still struggling, like drowning in the ocean, and no one's throwing you a life vest?
Here's what I've gotten better at. That was weird. Here's what I've gotten better at. I've gotten better at reaching. I hate feeling like I'm bothering people. Even though you're kind of running the show and everything. I hate feeling like you know I'm bothering somebody. So I've gotten better at reaching out to people, to getting conflicts, and saying these are the dates we're planning on shooting. I need everybody's conflict for that date. I never really used to do that. I used to schedule and then send it out, and then people would come back at me like, oh well, I can't do this day and I can't do this day, and I'd kind of
Oh,
shoot
okay.
myself in the I kind of shoot myself in the foot. And then I'm that person that's just like, people are here doing you a favor, so I go, okay, based on that information, I'll rewrite the schedule, and I'll move some stuff around. But I hate bothering people and making them feel like they owe me something. That's kind of like my feelings. Like I'm making people feel like they owe me something, and they need to be available every single minute of every single weekend for this film or whatever. I've gotten better at reaching out to people, saying, "Hey, just give me your conflicts. That way, I can do a schedule based off of just when you're available."
So that's interesting to me. So you said you initially would just create a schedule and
Yeah,
then see if people would get back to you and be like, I can't do this,
yeah.
I can't do that.
That's what I did for the first pig face. I just made a schedule and I
Okay.
sent it out. I said, "This is when we're shooting. This is when we're shooting this and this and this, or these scenes." And then I just wait for people to say, "Hey, this day I'm not available. I'm not available here." And then I would just move things around based on that information. The
Okay.
latest one that we're doing, I made sure to reach out to everybody and say, "Hey, just throw me conflicts." That's been awful. It's been awful. And again, it's not them. Like again, they owe me nothing. And I encourage people to do it that way, so you're not shooting yourself in the foot and just making something up and then having to rewrite it when somebody comes at you and says, I can't do that day. We're working on a schedule right now, and it's awful. It's hard. The conflicts that we have for this are just terrible, but it'll get done eventually.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting to know sort of how we actually create a schedule, because I think that anybody out there listening to the show who's contemplating making a micro budget film or something, let's just say you have 10 people total. That's cast
Mhm.
and crew total.
Right.
I think that's generally a solid number if you're going to make a short film or something. You probably have at least 10 people within between cast and crew. And what are the steps that you actually do initially to create the schedule? So what I would always do is at the casting stage, and this is just me personally. I know a lot of directors who don't do this, but at the casting stage, before I offer the role to anybody, the first thing they do is they will fill out, when they show up for auditions, they fill out an audition form, and I will have in big letters on that audition form, write down all of your conflicts between this date and this date, so that I know going in, even before I've cast somebody, this person would not even be able to be available for the dates that I'm thinking about shooting. Now, if they are really good and they sort of blow me away, and I'm like, I can't really make this movie without them, like they are really, really great and they'd really enhance it, I will then reach out to them and see if there's any wiggle room on that. It's like, is there
Mhm.
anything I could do scheduling wise that would work during this time frame? If they say no, I can't hold up the entire film just for someone. So I'll go down to like the second choice or something like that.
Right.
But I always tell people, especially at the point of casting as well, and I tell them, hey, if you're going to take this on, if you're agreeing to this, you have to understand X, Y, and Z. X is I expect you to show up. You're going to have to show up for read throughs. You're going to have to show up for, random things that, fittings for costumes potentially, all sorts of stuff. I'm like, are you committing to it? Will you commit to this? So, Communication solves 95% of all things in life, in my opinion. And I always felt like if you communicated with people well ahead of time, saying these are the expectations I have, if you can't meet those expectations or you think you're going to have a problem, we're done. Like, sorry, we'll try to fit you in another film later on down the road.
Right.
Isabel, when I went into Isabel, that was the first time I had, because I had always scheduled for the Grand Horror and Outpost Doom. I did schedules on all of those, or each of those, but the whole thing was they were all my friends. So they were always available on Friday nights, Saturdays, and Sundays. There were no conflicts. It was
Right.
always a one location sort of deal. And so my schedule basically became, hey, on Friday night we're going to shoot scenes 1 through 5. And on Saturday morning between these hours, we're going to shoot scenes, blah, 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 blah. Here's what's needed. Here are the actors that need to be on set. I would tell them if there's going to be makeup or something. I would say, for example, I would set scene 10 at 1 p.m. on a Saturday. The people who need to be there are DJ, Steve, and Jeremy. However, Jeremy's going to be in makeup. So I would make sure the schedule said that Jeremy needs to arrive on set at 12 o'clock so that he can get into makeup so he's ready to shoot at 1. Now, the big thing that, I don't claim to be a great filmmaker in pretty much any respect other than one. I am a master scheduler. I used to, when I was in high school, I used to schedule and organize rock festivals in and around Grand Island at different places. So I would have bands coming from all over the country. There was this one a bar in Alma called Rockfest, and we had bands from like Kansas and Oklahoma and Nebraska bands and just Iowa, all these area bands, and the thing went off without a hitch. A 2-day festival that I organized, and that has always been my talent. And I remember when I was scheduling Chills Down Your Spine, we shot Chills Down Your Spine in 2 2-week blocks. So DJ flew down and we started on day 1 of week 1 and we finished on day 14 of week 2. And we shot all kinds of short films, like multiple different short films, different locations. We had dozens and dozens of actors, crew members. We were shooting morning through the night. Barely got any sleep those 2 weeks. And I remember Mark Popejoy, who we will have on as a guest at some point on this show.
Right.
I remember Mark Popejoy. Gosh, it was probably towards the end of week 2, and everything went off without a hitch. Like everything went off without a hitch. And he said, "How did you pull this off? Like how did you make this schedule?" And I was like, "Well, here's what I did." And essentially what you have to do is like what you're doing. I got everybody's schedules, right? I said, "Give me your schedule, everything between this 2-week block, the hours that you would be available." And then let's say for Hysteria, there was a bunch of girls that were in that, and they all had different schedules. Some of them are mothers, they had to go pick up their kids after school certain days, and like all of this stuff, right? So what I did was, like you did, tell me we're gonna film it this block of day, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Give me your schedules. So they would give me my schedules, and then I would look at the script, and I broke it down by scene, and I was like, okay, what scenes can we film at, for example, 2 p.m. in the afternoon on Friday? Which actresses will be there? Okay, these 3 actresses will be there. Oh, good. They're in scene 4 together, and it's only those 3. So I'm going to shoot scene 4 first at that time. And that's how you had to do it, like all the way through. And I think that first 2-week block, we shot maybe 5, 6 short films in 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and with a huge cast and crew, and it went off without a hitch. That is my personal talent. I know how to schedule something. Is that a talent of yours? Do you feel like you're a good scheduler?
Absolutely not. I'm not great. I've gotten better. That's what I can say. In the years of doing this, I've gotten better, but it's not saying a lot because it went from never doing a schedule to just like getting some nuts and reaching out to people and asking them questions. So, I mean, it hasn't been like a giant leap. And also, like, the thing is, too, is I wanted to shoot everything in order, like through, beginning to end, everything in order. And I think Remission maybe was the first film I couldn't do that. and that was tough for me to adjust. Also, was going, I can't just start at the beginning and shoot every scene in order to the end. I have to kind of mix things around, and that was tough for me also. So I'm not great at scheduling, but I am good enough to make it through, if
Yeah.
that's saying anything.
Chronological filming I always prefer, and the main reason I prefer to shoot things in order is I feel like it's a natural progression for the actors as they're going through their character arcs. One of the big problems
Right.
with shooting things out of order is, if the actor is supposed to be in one headspace in this scene, and you're like, okay, now we're getting to the end of the movie, we have to schedule that scene right
Mm-hmm.
after this. It's you don't get the
Right.
performance. You just don't get the performance because it's, not that it's necessarily giving a bad performance, but it's just
Right.
so hard to get back into that headspace. So, with regards to scheduling, tell me how you actually do your schedule. Is it like on an Excel spreadsheet? Is it just, hey, an email, you need to be here at this time? Do you put it in a Word document? Like, how do you create your schedules?
When I did the last one for Pigface, I put it all in just a Word document. I went through everybody's kind of. I went through the script and kind of broke down scenes and who's in what scene, and then just kind of went on a Word document and created a schedule and sent it out, and then just waited for feedback. And that's just easier for me too, because it's easier for me just to go back in there and it's all right there, and I can just kind of edit. It's just easier for me to edit and change things around in a Word document. Spreadsheet would probably be the way to go. I just didn't do it that way.
Yeah.
More than likely this time around, working and scheduling with somebody, more than likely it's going to be in a spreadsheet.
See, I've never used a spreadsheet, and I probably should as well. I've always just opened up Word, and I will put shooting schedule in big letters at the very top, bold, underlined, and
Yep.
then 9 p.m. Saturday, arrive on set for costumes. 10 a.m. Scene 3, here are the actors that are required. And what I'll normally do is, again, you always, at least for my schedules, I always put the time in which I want the actors there, and it's always an hour before I'm actually planning on them filming anything. And the reason why is because if you schedule an actor to show up at 3 p.m. on a Saturday, they won't show up until 3 p.m. on a Saturday a lot of times. And
Right.
how does that harm you? Well, if your shooting schedule says you're shooting scene 10 at 3 p.m. on a Saturday and your actor arrives, it's going to take an hour just for, get him in costume, getting the actor ready to go, doing whatever makeup needs to be on him. So I always schedule the actors an hour before I anticipate I'm actually going to utilize them. If there's something that's going to be effects heavy, that let's say Heather or Benito or somebody's like, hey, I'm going to have an hour and a half to get this person into monster makeup, always put that on the schedule. And I always schedule them
Right.
still an hour before. So sometimes they're sitting around for an hour in gory whatever monster makeup waiting for their scene to be called. But once they're in the makeup, they're not going to leave. They're kind of stuck there. So
Now, have you ever had the luxury of scheduling rehearsal time before you shoot?
it sort of depends on what you mean by that. If you're talking about, do I put rehearsal time like on an actual Word document and say, hey, these days we're going to rehearse? No. Usually, what I have done is when we are going to do some sort of walk through or read through, something like that, I will just send an email to everybody and be like, hey, is anybody available this Saturday for a read through? And if they're all available for this Saturday at the read through, I say, okay, meet at this point at this time, and boom, we'll go through it. Not really like an actual schedule like a
Right.
formal schedule, just kind of like, hey, are you available? And if they're not available, because especially in the past couple of years during COVID, it was not really possible to get people in the same vicinity to do this a lot of times, and so
Right.
we would just do online stuff, kind of like how we're doing this podcast on Google Meets, and
Right.
we could schedule something for 9 p.m. when kids are asleep and people are available, and then we could do our read throughs and stuff that way. So it's kind of all over the place on how you actually do schedule it. But what are some of the nightmares? We talk about how difficult it is to sort of put one of these things together because we're dealing with multiple people. They all have different things going on in their lives. What are some of the downsides that you see for creating a schedule? Do you feel like sometimes you create the schedule and you wasted your time?
At this point, no. I mean, you're scheduling around. Oh, here's the nice thing about what I'm doing with right now is everybody's been like, "Hey, write your schedule, and we will just try to figure it out." So that's been really cool from a lot of people on this time around. On the last film, it wasn't that easy. You're dealing with people that obviously they have jobs and they have other things they've committed to, and some people are shooting multiple films at the same time and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I run into a problem. What I tell everybody is, hey, if there's an issue, anything comes up, you can't get out of work, people that are doing other people's films, I would just be like, hey, schedule that first, and then I'll just schedule around it, because I try to be a little bit more of a loose, filmmaker, a little bit more of a loose just person in general. I'm pretty chill, and that's, I think, maybe a downfall of mine, is I'm just kind of a little too lax on things. But I want people also to come out. My whole thing about doing this is like just people coming out and having fun and having a good time. And so stressing people out with, well, no, I need you to be here at this time, and if you can't be, then you can't do this. That's just taking the fun out of this whole filmmaking venture.
I've had to
Um,
recast people because of that. Where
yeah,
I'm the opposite. So I take the schedule very, very seriously because
yeah,
I feel like, hey, you're making a commitment to this. You got to honor this commitment. Everybody else is honoring this commitment. You have to honor this commitment as well. So there's been times when I've had to fire people who are not honoring this commitment that they said. And I tell, to be fair, I tell them all of this stuff up front. When they're being cast, I said, these are my expectations for you. And don't want, if you don't feel like you can do these expectations, then just tell me no, you're out. I'll find somebody else. But I always look at this as like, hey man, look at all the time, energy, and effort everyone else is putting into this.
right.
And it seems like on so many of these bigger projects, there's always somebody who just, I don't want to say they're lazy, but they just don't take it as seriously as the rest of us are taking it. And I tell everybody, and I'm a pain in the ass when it comes to communication. Like I will constantly pester people. Like here's an example. So we had an actress on Chills Down Your Spine who was a fairly major actress in one of the short films, and nice person. I love this person to death. Terrible at responses. So it's like, well, give me your schedule so I can schedule this thing. Okay, I'll get it to you. Day goes by. Another day goes by. Hey, you got that schedule? Yeah, I'm still working on it. Don't worry, I'll get it to you. Day goes by. Another day goes by. And you're just getting infuriated. At least I am. Because that's how I am. Because I'm just like, wait a minute. I can't do anything until I get the information from you. Right? You're not just screwing me over, you're screwing over all of the other people, because the longer it takes you to get back to me with your availability, is more chance it's going to take for someone else to be like, well, wait a minute, I can't do that now, or whatever it may be. So I kind of become a pain in the ass about it. So I will just keep pestering people until they get it to me. And if they don't get it to me, I will just send them a message and be like, hey, I've asked you multiple times. I've not gotten anything. I'm going to have to move on with somebody else. That generally gets them to respond pretty quickly.
Yeah,
But at
yeah,
that
for sure.
at that point in time, then I start worrying because I have anxiety issues. I'm like, well, can I even rely on this person to show up? If they can't be bothered to respond when they're going to be available, should I even have them on this project? Or, I'm the one responsible for it ultimately. I'm the one responsible for everyone's time. I know the other four people are going to show up, but what about this person? And what happens if they don't? That's going to fuck everything up. And I'll let you in on a little Dead Lantern secret. For many years, what I would do is I'd always have a backup. I'd always have a backup waiting in the wings. So I would tell people when I cast them, I would say, particular people that I'd never worked with before or didn't really know, I didn't know what their reputation was, I would say, okay, yeah, congratulations, you have the role. But then I would tell the backup person, like my second choice, and I was like, hey, I will give you this role should the first, the person fall through somehow. If they don't do this, just make sure you are available just in case. Were you cool with that? There would always be backups ready to go. So a lot of cases, I would just be, assuming it wasn't the day of the shoot or something like that.
Right.
I would always have a backup in place for a worst case scenario, because that's how I think with schedules. I always think worst case scenario. So worst case scenario, how long is this scene actually going to take me to shoot? Well, I'm going to schedule it for an hour or maybe sometimes 2 hours longer than what it's actually going to take. Because what happens is when you're on set, let's say you have actors and you're like, okay, we're going to shoot this scene from 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock at night, this one scene. And actors come into this like, oh my god, this is going to be kind of brutal. 3 hours on this one scene. It's just a bunch of people talking, a dialogue sequence. But then when you knock it out and you tell everybody, we are ahead of schedule, you guys want to knock out these next scenes, energy goes up, right? Because just it's like a mental thing. If you schedule things for like, oh, I'm going to do this big heavy effect sequence and I'm only going to put it on the actual schedule, it's going to take 1 hour. Scene 10 is going to be 1 hour. It's a giant jaw tear, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's actually going to take you 3 hours. So once that hour blows by, those people on set are like, well, we are now behind schedule. And in their mind, they start thinking, oh, shit, look how much more we have to do. And it just brings people down. They get sort of emotionally checked out in a lot of ways. People start cutting corners, and they do things faster and quicker. So anybody out there listening who's trying to think of hey, I've never done a schedule before, I would always recommend you to schedule for longer than you anticipate that scene taking, so that you're always, quote unquote, ahead of schedule when you're on set, and everyone's feeling good because they think they're doing a great job and they're knocking everything out. It's mental. It's psyops, Josh.
Yeah, I wish I wish I would have known that Dead Lantern secret, 10 years ago. That would have been fantastic.
Always have a back. It's like an understudy, right? You have an understudy in theater, right? So if the main actor, something happens to him, they fall ill or something, you have the understudy that can step in.
Yeah, I was always the understudy. So I was always like, oh, this guy can't do it. He sucks. I'll just do it myself. And I've done that. I've actually done that. In the very first movie I made, I did that. And it didn't make it better. That's pretty cool. It was pretty rough. Yeah, I wish I had better like scheduling advice for people. I just, and especially since you and I kind of go about it a different way. You know what I mean? As far as like, yeah. I have just like you, major anxiety about the scheduling thing. And it's not that I don't take it as serious. I used to take it way too serious. And then I would just be a grumpy asshole all the time and people weren't having fun. And so I tried to adjust a little bit on the lightening up side when it came to shooting these films and making these schedules and people having conflicts. But that's also taught me to adjust on the fly. You could either shoot nothing because one thing fell through that day, or you could figure it the fuck out and shoot something.
And we talk about, sort of made a joke at the top of the show that, well, you just rip up the schedules when you show up on set anyway. Things always run behind schedule. Somehow, some way, it doesn't matter how many hours you pack into it. It's somehow, some way, something will go wrong on set. An effect will take way longer, Benito, to set up than what they claimed it was going to take, and you start running behind schedule. So when you're running behind schedule, what do you do at that point? Are you saying, okay, like, in your mind, you're on set, you have your schedule set, everything's going fine, and then boom, you run into a wall, and you're like, oh god, the camera broke down. It's going to take an hour to get this fixed up or whatever it is. What do you do immediately when you start running behind the schedule that you have?
Okay, so this is again. Let's base this off there's not a right or wrong answer. So here we go. Um, for me, if I start running just way behind, again, this is just me respecting actors' time. I will get everybody together and say, hey, we are planning on we plan to do this, and this, but obviously we're behind. Sometimes you're losing light because we shot outside during the daytime on one film, and if we're losing our light, sun's going down, can't do anything about it anyway. But I get everybody together and say, hey, we're behind. I'm not 100% sure if we're going to get to this last scene that we're supposed to shoot today. And I just talk that out with the actors. And then generally we either decide like we're going to try to push through it. We think we can get it done, or we're going to cut the scene for that day. That's the other thing too that I started doing for that last film is I started scheduling an extra day. So if
yes, that's a great idea.
I told everybody, hey, we're going to shoot these 8 weeks, but I have these 2 weeks scheduled for scenes we just didn't get to, or we ran behind and we didn't get to shoot that scene. So I need everybody to just have open available on these extra 2 weekends. We may or may not need them.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up because I've done that as well. And that is a godsend. Every filmmaker should do that.
So that would allow me to let people go, knowing that we just had the extra built-in days to make them up. So
yeah, absolutely. You want to hear a funny scheduling story?
Can't wait.
Okay, so Blood Model was a film and chills down your spine, and Blood Model was a thing where I had agreed to film this and direct it only if it was a quote-unquote professional set. We had everybody there. Everyone follows the shooting schedule, like all of it. We had sliders, and we had multiple crew members, cinematographers, like all these different people on the set. And on Friday night, there is a scene that sort of like a sexy scene in it that involves some killing, and we were shooting it at our friend Eric Moyer's house. He graciously allowed us to use his bedroom, and this scene, on the shooting schedule, and to this day, I don't understand how I didn't complete this in time. On the shooting schedule, this was 2 hours. 2 hours long, because I was like, there's no way I won't be able to get this scene shot in 2 hours. And that was adding in the extra hour. I'm like, this is simple. This is very easy. So much so that I did something I never do, which is storyboard. I hate storyboarding, but I storyboarded this thing because I told Mark Popejoy, I was like, hey, I'll be professional as well. If I'm demanding professionality from you and having all this stuff ready to go, I'll have everything storyboarded. Do you know how long that scene took to shoot? We started it at 8 p.m., I think, that Friday night. We finished at 5:30 a.m.
Holy shit.
That is how long it took to shoot. Benito, like Wetworks, they all came down. They were sitting around for hours. And we were like, is Eric and his wife going to come back at some point in time and see we're still in their house doing all this stuff? So what did that do? That dominoed everything with the shooting schedule. So our main actors were from Omaha. So at 5:30, they basically had to clean themselves up. So they didn't actually leave Lincoln until probably around 7 a.m. And they were supposed to shoot at 11 a.m. up at Hot Shops in Omaha. And it was 5:30 in the morning when we wrapped. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, how the fuck are we going to get everything filmed? Because it was just this weekend. I think our actress flew in from New York. So there was no keeping her around. She had a plane flight out of Nebraska for like Sunday afternoon or something like that. And so we sent an email blast because at Hot Shops it was sort of like she's like a model and there's all these artists that are painting her. And so we had all of these extras. Probably, I think Schweitzer was one of the extras, if I remember correctly. We had all these extras set up to show up at Hot Shops at like 10 o'clock in the morning. And at 5:30 a.m., I had to make a decision. I got to email blast all of these people and tell them, hey, we're going to push it back till like 1 p.m. That was the max. I was like, ugh. Okay, we're going to let the actresses get some sleep. We got to make sure the extras know not to show up in the morning like they've been planning on for, 3 weeks. So we do all this. We get there at 1 o'clock. We start filming, and it just takes forever. It is now probably 11 p.m. at night, and we're still at Hot Shops. And you can see these extras are just miserable. I'm miserable.
Yeah.
Everybody is miserable. And there was a decision, right? It was, do we just push through and finish it up? Or do we just kill it and whatever? So everybody was telling me, just push through, Matt, push through. And I was like, fuck this. So I got up in front of everybody and I'm like, here are the options. And I was very angry, and it came out very, very angry. I was like, here are the options. One, we stay here and we fight through because all these extras were here. We had to have the same extras show up,
Right.
to have everything matched up. I was like, we either fight through it, or you guys come back tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Go home, get some sleep, come back at 1 o'clock tomorrow. I'm leaving it in your hands. Your decision. What do you guys want to do? And they all wanted to go home and sleep.
Oh
So
my God.
they all left and they all went home and slept. And we shot on a day we were not supposed to shoot. We had to come back to Hot Shops. I can't remember if Mark had booked that Sunday just in case or if he had to book another day at Hot Shops, but we had to bring them all back, and then we had to spend another, 5 hours going through and filming all of the stuff that we couldn't film because it took too long. It just took way
Right.
too long. And to this day, Josh, I have no idea why it took so long to film this stuff in Moyer's bedroom. It was like I was following storyboards, and for some reason, it just took forever. And yeah, miserable experience. But that's an example of you got to come up with. I mean, you got to ask the actors sometimes. Can you be available the next day, or can you do this? If they would have said no, we can't be around. I don't know what I would have done. We would have just had to try to pull favors with other friends, throw them in the background. I guess shallow depth of field it so the audience doesn't really see that they're not the same extras that were there
Right.
before. But yeah, these are the things with scheduling. Like the best laid plans, you can schedule everything all you want, and it could be an amazing schedule. And then as soon as something goes wrong on set, you are thrown off the rest of the time.
Right.
You're gonna a talent and a trait that you're gonna have as a director is you're gonna have to say, okay, how can I fix this? What other things can I shoot? You're going to have to be creative. You're going to have to shoot things maybe a little faster than you had planned before to try to make up the time that you lost on the previous scene. And in trying not to cut corners and trying to make it not look terrible. So, scheduling is one thing. Effectively managing that schedule is a completely different beast.
Right. I think that's kind of the best thing that people can kind of take away from this in general is just like, throw your schedule together, but if it falls apart, like just go. You could quit, or you could just figure it out. Matt figured it out. And a lot of people that, I know just figure it out, If
Yeah.
you want to finish your shit, gotta figure it out.
Yeah, you have to have intellectual curiosity about how can I fix this, right? What can I do to possibly fix this? And in the case of Blood Model, be completely honest, I sat on that film for 4 years. I thought it was god awful. I was like, I put an edit together of that. I was like, this sucks. This is terrible. And Mark had spent like $5,000 on it, and I just shelved it. And then 4 years later, I was just sitting around. I was like, wait a minute. What if I edited it this way? And then it turned out to be something I actually liked after I edited it the new way.
Right.
So, but yeah, I would always recommend micro budget filmmakers out there try to have a backup plan as much as possible.
Yeah.
One thing that I did do on Dead Lantern stuff is, let's say I had a schedule for a Saturday. Here's all the stuff that's going to be on a Saturday. I would make it so that the actors that were there on Saturday, a few of them, if let's say there's 3 actors in a scene, we'll use Megan, Eric, and I don't know who's another actor in the local scene. Mark.
There you go. I was going to say the same person.
Mark Popejoy, right? So you have those 3 people on a Saturday, and they're doing a bunch of scenes together on a Saturday. But what happens when Mark's wife, who I love to death, Jenny, if you're listening to this, you're great. But Mark's wife says, "Mark, come home. I'm pissed off at you." And Mark's got to leave. So all you have is you have Eric and you have Megan. Well, what I would always do is I would always have sort of like backup scenes that I could do in a worst case scenario. So maybe there are scenes that just Megan and Eric are in that weren't scheduled for that day, but let me plan that I could actually do those in a worst case scenario. Those are the kinds of things you want to be thinking about when you're doing a schedule, but I don't really know what we haven't covered yet. I think that pretty much, again, we're not professionals.
No.
We put stuff on Word documents.
Right.
Is there anything else about scheduling that you can think of that you think would be good for people to know?
When you do your schedule, Matt, you give a start time, right? Do you ever give an end time? Do you ever say, "I promise I'll have you wrapped by 10 p.m. this night"?
That's kind of funny you say that. I do, but then I also tell people at the initial read-through that promises are meant to be broken.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of like, hey, especially if it's a night shoot, I always tell people, I'm like, hey, yeah, we're going to be done when the sun comes up, right? If we can only film at night, we're done when the sun comes up, because so plan that it's going to take at least that long. If I promise to have you out by 2 a.m., but worst case scenario, you're going to be there till 6 a.m.,
Right.
And, just give your actors and the crew a heads up that this is hard, man. Making movies is hard. You have no idea what kind of curveballs are going to be thrown at you on set. You have no idea what's going to happen. An effect shot could go awry. And then, Heather might have to drive back into town 40 minutes to get something and then drive back. And that's an hour and a half that's screwed up in your time. Try to have backup plans. Tell people ahead of time. I always have my shooting schedule out at least 3 months before I film. That's how anal about it I am, because I want everybody. I say, hey, I gave you plenty of heads up. There's no reason 3 months out you can't request this day off from your job. You better not give me an excuse that, I had to work this day. Why? You knew this was the schedule 3 months ago.
Right.
I find, and I know you're kind of in a weird situation here with your schedule, but what you're doing, and I mean this by no offense, I would never do it this way. I'd be like, I want to know what your schedule is. I would have had it done and finished 3 months ago. And so everybody has the time to take it off. Everybody can plan, hey, I'm going to work a few extra hours this day so that I don't have to worry about getting fired on this day, et cetera, et cetera. I can't imagine what you're doing and what you're going through, because it would drive me crazy trying to do what you're doing. And, hey, we film next month and we don't have the shooting schedule out yet. That would drive me nuts. Can't handle it.
Yeah, I try. I try to get everybody, a month out. I feel like a month out is enough time to ask off from your job, but also, like I said, reaching out to people and saying, hey, what are the days that you're not available?
Yeah.
And those are the days that you gave me, so I just knew not to schedule that that day. Every other day is free game. That means every other day that I told you we were going to shoot, you're available.
Yep.
So,
and make sure, and that's the thing, also the thing we need to is how do you communicate the schedule to people, right? I always email it. Here's a schedule. Every time I email someone on the schedule, I say, please respond to this to let me know that you received it. Because sometimes you send emails or scripts to people and, I didn't see it, whatever. It's like, tell me that you received it. Once you say you've received it, hey, you got any questions, comments, or concerns, you better tell me now, because if you don't, you're going to be off this film. I have a backup in place, don't worry. You are replaceable. Right. So, yeah. But that's all I got for scheduling.
I learned a lot today, Matt.
Oh, did
My notebook's out. I'm writing shit down. This is a scheduling 101. This podcast was this show was for me. So
well, that's good. I know. The funny thing is I love scheduling. Like, I have this weird thing. Like, I love to schedule things. I get incredibly frustrated when people don't stick to the schedules, including myself. I'm not gonna say, hey, I'm a perfect. I follow it to a T. I fuck up and don't do things as well as should be. But the actual creation of the schedule, I love it because it almost feels like you're just kind of like this puppet master, and you're like, haha, I'll plug this person here and here and here, and it's all coming together. It's like a puzzle. It's a giant puzzle piece that all comes together, and I love it.
Until those puppets cut their strings and fuck you, and then you're like, damn it, I don't want to be the puppet master anymore.
Yeah, totally get that. But does anybody out there, do you guys have any questions, comments, and concerns about scheduling? Is there anything that you guys have experienced that we didn't cover in this episode? Let us know. Send us an email at outpostunknown@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment in the comment section, and we'll address it on a future show. But with that, Josh, I think we're good to go. What are we talking about next week?
We are going to chat about why we make horror films.
Ooh.
I'm excited for that show.
I hope so. Maybe I can learn something from you.
Oh, it's going to get dark.
All right. Catch you next week, everybody.